And Alfredo, I can keep letting people in if you want to go ahead and get started at 4 minutes after.
Okay, thanks, Kate. I think, Stephen, you were going to kick this off, right?
Either I or Brian, if you want to give a program overview real quick.
Sure, I can do that. Stephen, thanks everyone for joining. This is the statewide California Gas Emerging Technology Program webinar. Basically, this is a program that's funded by the three major gas IOUs in California, and we look at technologies that are not quite in their alpha stage, but are coming early into market and are commercialized. And the main purpose of doing these is to really assess how these technologies can be integrated into the IOU's portfolios of energy efficiency programs. So this is a market support program that basically enables, as technologies emerge, to understand their savings potential and the steps that they may go through to be offered as measures in individual programs. So with that, we do we calibrate our research plan annually, and this is an overview today of what we will be sharing. So Stephen, will you walk us through the initial part here?
Yeah, so I'm going to take this a little bit out of order, but I'll sort of describe what we're going to be going through. So this is, in essence, our draft plan for the research we plan to conduct next year. I'm going to walk you through sort of the vision, the goals of the program, a little bit of what Brian's already discussed. Then I'm going to have Crystal Mullion with Linkus go through a little bit of the background. And then she's going to present the first 3 of the 5 goals, and I'm going to present the last 5 of the goals. So if you'd like to scroll down to page, I probably should have done this earlier. Page 6, bottom of page 6. I'm just going to go over it real briefly. So somewhat, as Brian indicated, the vision of the program is, that we're trying to address global, climate change relative to gas technologies. We're hoping to work with a collaborative fashion with the technology developers, other stakeholders, including, of course, the gas IOUs in the state of California. So this is, as I indicated earlier, the roadmap for the work that we're planning for next year. We elicited input from our technical advisory group last week on this very plan. And if you want to scroll, yeah, there we go. And in essence, it's a roadmap. We ended up changing a few things from last year's plan for a variety of reasons. We're not going to go through all the details in the plan. What we will do is send it out at the end, and you'll have a week to review and provide written comment. Although you're free to provide comments once we're actually done walking through the plan itself at a high level. And with that said, I think Crystal, I'll let you go through and do the background.
Thanks, Stephen. So if you can go up a couple pages, Alfredo. Right there at the bottom of that page. So yeah, essentially, as Stephen said, we have an annual research plan to just publicize what we plan to work on in the coming year. We want to look at new technologies. We want to look at the market barriers for those technologies. And we also want to look at existing technologies and seeing if there's market barriers or things that we need to do to boost the participation of those technologies. We have a couple of other research plans from 2022 and 2023, and this is our 2024 one. So I just want to go over a couple of policy and codes and standards, things that have changed since 2022. So everyone's aware, and you can always read the 2022 and 2023 plans if you want to look back to see how this has evolved. So the first thing is in April of this year, the CPUC released a decision that eliminates non-exempt and non-cost-effective gas measures in most residential and new construction programs. It also ordered a research and stakeholder process to develop something called a viable electric alternative technical guidance. And the decision didn't directly say this, but we can infer that the goal of that is to start phasing out gas incentives later on. And probably what will happen is that things that are considered not cost effective that are gas measures would be phased out before things that are considered to be cost effective, or if there's not an electric alternative that's cost effective, those gas measures would be still here. So those are most likely to be things like industrial or boilers that produce very high temperature hot water, high temperature steam, things that electric boilers or electric heat pumps can't do right now. So the VEA activity is currently in process. That's expected in Q4 of this year. That group's going to be looking at electrification cost impacts by end use. They're going to create a cost calculator that's going to project the costs for electrification for different measures. And then they'll create some criteria for determining what is a viable electric alternative. Okay, the next one. So in September of last year, CARB approved their proposed 2022 state strategy for the state implementation plan that serves as a zero emission standard for space and water heaters that goes into effect in 2030. It's still unclear to our team whether zero emissions includes carbon dioxide, but it will probably include NOx at a minimum. This was voted on and approved by CARB, but the details have not yet been determined. We did find during some research we did in 2022 that existing AQMD regulations that limit NOx emissions do impact the participation of certain water heaters. So even if CO2 wasn't included, it may impact participation of water heaters and furnaces. In March of this year, the Bay AQMD approved some new amendments to phase out the sales and installation of both gas furnaces and gas water heaters that emit NOx, which would include those that emit CO2 from gas. Bay Area is only one AQMD. We have many AQMDs in California for those who are not from the state. But it's likely that if they adopted this, other AQMDs may adopt as well. In 2022's Title 24, which was effective this year, that included some mandatory requirements for gas fired water heating and space heating systems in single family to be ready for the replacement of those systems with electric systems by adding some additional requirements. They also added some prescriptive requirements to use heat pumps for space heating if you were going to use prescriptive, or you would have to use the performance approaches. I also went through the proposed Title 24 2025 regulations. There's nothing in there that would say that you can't use gas-fired equipment any more than 2022 did. However, they have a lot of new proposed requirements that would make all electric equipment transition more easy. So examples would be a limit on hydronic space heating supply water temperature. Typically that might be 160, 180 degrees Fahrenheit. An electric heat pump water heater has difficulty meeting those temperatures if it can do it at all. So they're proposing to limit that temperature to around 130 or 140. They want to require mechanical heat recovery and thermal energy storage in large commercial buildings to mitigate challenges with heat pump water heaters. They have some requirements for pool and spa heating, to use either solar water heating, heat pump water heating, or use some kind of waste heat recovery. And then they also have requirements for commercial kitchens to have enough electrical infrastructure so they can convert to an all-electric cook line later on. So those are the major, there's probably other policies and decisions that affect gas consuming EE measures, but those are the major ones that affect us in California.
But Crystal, before you go on to the goals, I wanted to point out a couple of things I missed earlier and maybe one quick update. The quick update is I believe some of the VEA work is now flowing into Q1 of next year.
Okay.
Originally projected in this year. If you could scroll to page 4, I believe, yes. For those of you not in California, there's in addition to the regulatory constraints that Crystal indicated, there are some other restraints that have been in place for a while. So to preface sort of what we can and cannot do in the program. So we can't do net generation, so that takes CHP off the table. This is we cannot do in front of the meter type of activities, T&D, that large scale hydrogen, that kind of thing. We cannot address here. Crystal implied it, but early R&D or Brian, probably before TRL 8 is probably not in scope. It's a little gray. Projects that don't save therms or overcome barriers to help saving therms are probably not appropriate. Obviously, this is about natural gas, not about electricity. There is a parallel program that the CalNext program that focuses on electrical end uses. And then obviously, well, maybe not so obviously, technologies that don't use IOU supplied gas. So for instance, we cannot do propane types of fuel switching. So just want to add those contexts, Crystal, if you want to move on to the first 3 goals.
Yeah, that would be great. If you want to go there, Alfredo, to water heating. So for our 2024 research plan, we grouped our goals by end use. We had done that in our 2023 plan, but we also renumbered these. So goals that start with 1 are water heating. So you have 1.1, 1.2, and so on. So you'll see, if you saw the 2022 plan, you'll notice the renumbering. So we have about 4 goals in water heating. The first one is to improve adoption of existing technologies. We did some research again in 2022 on existing technologies and looking at their participation in the water heating market. And we discovered a couple that we thought had some gaps. One of them we decided not to move forward with, but the other one we have decided to do a field study. That is for smart pumps in residential. That can be in single family or multifamily. Our current field study is focused on multifamily because that we felt had a bigger market segment. So currently we are in process of performing some field studies on the water heating savings for those smart pumps, and we hope to have that done this year. The next goal was to provide data for updated and new measure offerings of emerging water heating technologies. In 2022, we had selected these 3 technologies that you can see bulleted there for further study. The gas-fired adsorption and the gas-fired thermal compression water heater manufacturers were already working with some other groups to do testing on their technologies, and they didn't feel that it was advantageous to to send us other prototypes and have us do parallel testing. So for those two, we're just going to monitor what's going on with other groups that are testing those. We'll monitor publicly available data. We have contact with the manufacturers, so we might do something with those later on when they're closer to commercial launch. But at the moment, we won't be doing anything with those. However, we have launched a field study and a couple of lab studies for the gas-fired absorption heat pump water heaters. We call that a GAHP. If you hear me say that, that's what that means. We're going to be doing up to 5 field studies for those and up to 2 lab studies. There's 2 different manufacturers that have commercially available units in the United States. There are some manufacturers that have units available outside the United States. We're focusing on just these 2 at the moment for our field and our lab work. Currently, we have 1 field study in process, 1 lab study in process, and we are working on recruiting for more field studies and getting a hold of a second unit to test in the lab. The information from those studies is going to go into updating measure packages, providing some marketing and support materials for contractors, and any other modeling that needs to be done. If you want to go to 3. And that was a pretty large goal, 1.2, so I'm not going to go over all of it, but if you're interested, you can read through all of that. 1.3 was to provide modeling support and analysis for emerging water heating technologies. This goal is again focused on the gas absorption, GAHP technology. This modeling support is to look at this from a larger scale to see the impacts of installing a lot of these GAHPs versus electrifying versus sticking with what we already have. So the existing measure package has to use a model. This modeling is more like using ResStock and ComStock, something that's looking at a statewide or a larger level basis. So that study is also currently in process. And then number 1.4. That is looking at the potential for gas absorption heat pumps in pool heating. Pool heating can be accomplished using gas-fired, typical gas-fired boiler, electric heat pump water heaters, or GAHPs. So we're going to do a study to look at if it would make sense from a cost and technical standpoint to do water heating using gas absorption heat pump water heaters. And HVAC is our next section of goals. The first goal that we have is a new one for this year. We want to validate the energy savings from hydronic space heating fluid additives. There are a few fluid additives that we are aware of. We are going to test one this coming year that claims to reduce the surface tension of the water in space heating fluid, and the claim is that that increases the efficiency of the heat transfer between the water and the air in an air handler unit. And so we are going to actually install that additive in a few buildings and measure the before and after savings at those space heating boilers. And we'll determine if it actually does save the energy that it claims. There is, sorry, one sec, Alfredo. There's another product that we are aware of that we have not decided to test at this time. If you guys are aware of any other products as you're giving feedback, that would also be really helpful to know if there's other products besides this one. Okay, number 2. There's a lot of work going on in the rest of North America on dual fuel heating, and that means gas furnace with an electric heat pump with some kind of control to determine whether you're going to run the gas or the electric. We wanted to do a modeling study to start to see if that kind of a system would make sense from a cost or from an emissions standpoint in our mild California climate. So that project is in process right now. We were looking at what would use the least amount of fuel costs at a site, and what would use the least amount of emissions from a grid perspective. That project is expected to be completed in Q1 of next year, and that will be a pretty interesting one, I think. And the last goal under HVAC is to explore the application of combi systems in California. A combi system, as we call it here, is a system that does gas-fired water heating and gas-fired space heating. So it would be a hydronic space heating system combined with water heating. One of the GAHP manufacturers makes a system that can take the heat from a chilled water loop and transfer it into a hot water loop to heat either domestic hot water or space heating hot water. So that unit is something we want to test. We haven't been able to find any publicly available test data on that, but because it requires a concurrent cooling and heating load, the types of buildings we can put it in are somewhat limited. So we have been focused on recruiting for the domestic hot water application. And once we get those stabilized, we want to recruit for this combination system application and do a field study on that. And our third group of goals is commercial food service. We had a different goal under here in 2023's plan, and we decided to not go ahead with that, and we put a different goal under here. As you might remember from the background, in Title 24, 2025, they're proposing some requirements for electrical infrastructure in commercial kitchens so that they can convert to an all-electric line at some point. So what we are wanting to do is look at the load profiles of different cooking equipment in a gas-fired or in a kitchen, excuse me. And then we can look at what's the carbon intensity of the grid at those different hours of the day. The grid CO2 tends to be higher later in the day, and that could be that when that's the dinner rush, if you put in some electric equipment, it may not pay off from a source emissions standpoint if you were to use electric equipment versus gas fired when the grid is dirtier in that time of the day. So that's a smaller project. We just want to look at the load profiles and compare them to the grid CO2 profiles. And now I'll hand it off to Stephen.
So I'm going to go through the fourth set of goals, which are related to industrial and agricultural processes. I believe we had this high-level goal within the last research plan. We sort of refined it a little bit based upon what we found and sort of, where we think there's some good opportunities. So for the first one, goal 4.1 is to look at in-use processes in the sectors. We have done some preliminary research already this last year, and there's some areas where we think there's some opportunities in the deemed venue for savings claims, including dual condensate boilers, ceramic heat exchangers, utilized add-on technologies, or new Venturi steam traps, process control, thermal imaging, and then we've identified 5 potential measures within the CEA segment that could possibly use what we call new measure packages or new measures, or as the rest of the country just calls them measures. But in any case, so we're going to investigate further on these to see if we need to get data, to potentially support a future measure package in this area. So 4.2 is to look at operational efficiencies of a gas end-use process in industrial and agricultural sector. So this is a new one. We're looking at a project where we can do some underutilized or new technologies to improve the process efficiency, hoping that this is something that could be carried across other projects of the same type. And yeah, this will probably either be an analytical approach and or field study work on the new technologies. And if you move to 5, okay, so this was the higher level goal. 5 was a new category we had. We originally had a number of goals. We dropped a few of them for a number of reasons. One of which was some of the technologies we were looking at were before that TRL 8 or higher. So we're basically tracking those, and the goal is that down the road we will reintroduce them into our plan when we think that they're sort of near commercialization or early commercialization. So the two that we're sort of focusing on more now are low NOx burners and potentially carbon capture technologies on the customer side of the meter. So goal 5.1 is to reduce emissions of the gas-fired equipment. This is focused on burners that can be used, in all sorts of equipment. Probably for at least the initial focus will be on, an industrial or ag type of application, because those typically would get retrofit as opposed to, sort of a residential appliance where it's more of a new product that comes out with the different burners. Second one, as I alluded to previously, is carbon capture technology. So there's a couple different products on the market that can remove carbon, one of which is also clearly energy efficiency as well. So we're going to be looking at that one in particular, and hope to be able to do a field testing on that one next year. It's also something what we're doing as a technology focused pilot. So we're going to look at barriers to that kind of technology. Probably focusing on the two that we're aware of, but if you all are aware of some that may not be on our short list, or would like us to investigate further in that area, we're certainly open to understanding what's available. Traditionally, most of this has been focused on the large industrial side of things, and not necessarily in this sector. So that's why we're sort of interested to see how this will work and pencil out. So I believe that takes us to the end of the goals. So we've got quite a bit of time left. If anyone has questions, I'm looking at the chat right now. And do we have, okay. So there is a question from Raphael, and this is probably for Crystal. Have you touched base with Fishnick's Commercial Kitchen Food Service Tech Center San Ramon? They already have data on commercial kitchen load curves.
I have not, but I will do that. Thank you.
And
the other one's probably for me. Thank you, Frank. I will check that out as well.
So are there other questions that you all may have on any of these goals, or just the plan in general? For either Crystal or I, or just sort of conceptually where we're going with the program's research. I'll give you a minute or two to think about it a little bit. Also keep in mind, as I think I said at the beginning, we will send out the draft plan at the end of this, and you'll have a week till December 12th, close of business. If you have any written comments you'd like to provide us, we will take those under advisement and make our updates accordingly. And Frank just commented about at Frontier and the commercial facility are a subsidiary GTI. So he can help facilitate that. That's interesting. I think I had seen that too, and we're working with GTI on other aspects. So they're very involved in both product development and testing. So we are working together on a few items as well. Questions from anyone else that haven't, feel free to unmute if you'd like to ask them as well.
Hi, Stephen. This is Adam. Just curious if you've done any research on gas-fueled woks in the food service sector.
I don't believe we have. Crystal, have you all, when you were first scoping out things, did you come across woks?
No, that was more focused on existing EE measures. And I don't know that there is a more energy efficient wok, but if you had any info on that, that would be really great.
Okay, I'll follow up offline. Thank you.
Thanks.
And looks like Adam, you've got your hand up.
Hi, Adam Cornelius with CEE. I was just curious on your dual fuel scope on HVAC. Are you looking at any of the connected options, either within the building or with the grid, as part of the scope of this research project?
When you say connected, you mean data, real-time pricing, DR controls, or something else?
Part of it could also involve strategies for controls to optimize the gas and electric side of the dual fuel systems.
Okay, I'll let Crystal address that.
We're looking at how we can minimize the grid emissions as well as the site fuel cost. And our results weren't what we expected them to be. And so we've kind of pivoted a little bit, and we're looking at where would there be a fuel cost that would make it cost effective to run an electric heat pump, and where would emissions credit costs need to be to make it effective to run a gas-fired furnace at some points. We don't have anything with real-time pricing in there. We're more using kind of an average electric rate based on some time of use. What's the word I'm looking for? Rate plans for single-family homes. But we don't have any kind of like model where we've trained it on rates and then to see which system we would pick. And the reason is because when we did our initial analysis, what it kind of showed was that you would not use an electric heat pump in almost any hour in any climate zone to save fuel costs, and you wouldn't use a gas furnace most of the hours to save emissions. And I think part of that is the disparity between the electric costs and the gas costs in California. So we haven't done anything on like real-time pricing, since the pricing of the electricity would still be so much more expensive than gas. Does that answer your question, I hope?
Yeah, that gives me a good idea of what the scope of that of what you're exploring. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And by the way, all of you, all of our approved research projects are posted online, and you can see there's sort of multiple places where they'll show up, and in theory, it's all the same data. We've got a web page, the statewide ET programs have a web page. It's, I think, ca-etp.com. And then there's a legacy ETCC website. And I believe the data from the Cal-ETP site is copied over to the ETCC website, which also has a lot of legacy data from before the third party run ET programs. Our website, which also has links into the CA-ETP site, just has summaries of them and in essence links, but some of that description is on there at a high level. So if anyone's curious about some of what's been done and some of the reports that are done, they are posted. So any other questions that you'd like relative to food service or any, the hybrid or dual fuel systems or any of the others that we've raised today?
This is Adam Spitz again. I had a general question for you, Stephen, or anybody on the call. I saw a report this morning, I think it was published a while ago, about the abundance of hydrogen. And do we have any insight on the impacts of implementing more hydrogen into gas technology, natural gas, as a fuel mixture?
So that is an area where we are looking at. We did one project this last year on labeling appliances, which has not been done outside of the UK for potentially future, I'll say dual fuel mixtures of hydrogen and gas. Part of our studies, and Anushka, feel free to chime in on burners, have looked at the ones with the potential to use both gas and hydrogen. We are doing some testing right now that's currently going to be with our plan testing that's in the research plan with 100% natural gas. But the thought is we would then follow that up with a blend or partial blend of hydrogen. So yes, we are looking into that in particular in the industrial sector where it's more likely to be rolled out in large, not sure what I should say, large quantities, but yes, we are looking at that as well.
Thanks.
And I see another chat item. GTI has done extensive testing of hydrogen blends, natural gas, including cook testing, comparing food quality and hydrogen quality with blends of H2 and natural gas. Okay, that's good. Good data point. We actually haven't really talked about the blends in food service, so that's a good data point. We mostly have been looking at it in burners, which obviously are in food service, but I think the focus hasn't been on food service. It's more been on residential appliances, although that comments on appliances as well. So yes, they have done work in that area as well. All right. Give you another minute or so, and if anyone else has another question or comment, feel free to raise it at this point. Otherwise, as I indicated, we'll give you all a week to provide written comments if you'd like to do so. Going once, twice. Well, we appreciate you all attending, and thank you to the others that have provided input both within our group and externally. We appreciate all the input that we can get, and hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.